From dream to product, a recording from the frequency spectrum and internal radio. Greg R. Norton, September 1st, 2025. I wished, recently, to get some of the ideas in my mind down into this word processor screen. There's an old parable of sorts that I was told as a child, which I'm somewhat remembering this weekend. And as we begin into September, today, I'd like to get it down in writing. Say that I'm on board the boat, figuratively speaking, my rider's calling, and journey out upon the waters. The waves rise progressively higher and higher, and begin to come up the sides of my vessel. Finally, the story goes, the waves come all of the way over the sides of the boat, such that I practically became as one with the blustery sea. Let's say that it is from this perspective, as someone who has more or less somewhat blended in with the ocean waves, in this figurative sense, that I begin this writing. I guess that if I had to be honest, I'd say how the waters have gotten up quite a bit a few times before. This isn't really the first occasion when I've used this over-flooded metaphor, because, as I remember, this parable has been recalled by myself numerous times before. This unsailing boat, which has become tossed about upon the ocean waves. I mention it partly because of our tomorrow is the unofficial end of summer, and the first chilly breezes of winter are beginning to be felt. This, and because of another comparison I could make about our aging writers and musicians and actresses and actors, some of them anyway, and the ways they make people see as the years pass them by and they grow old. Imagine if the story writer and musician had survived a mental breakdown and then, like some others, had a successful comeback record and tour, but then survived a second breakdown and self-injury. Then let's suppose that he had somewhat subsequently been given assistance in living through the health department professionals and has survived 20 years in communal living in such an environment. Suppose also that during this time he had somewhat gone inward but had developed his career and learning to look upon and see his life and his work and the world around him from the ascended perspective. He says that he talks with angels, for instance. He says that he or she spends his days and nights in communion and conversation with higher beings, and has just all but gone upstairs, for all intents and purposes. Imagine that he had continued writing, and gotten moved again, and resettled in his childhood hometown. Imagine then the writer or musician had found a regular group, and gotten back to living, and working, and concurrently reading 3 or 4 books, for his first New Year's time back in his hometown. Then, as life's waters had then risen, as they always do, on the bow of his boat, he finds the sea beginning to come over the side of his boat, and so as a coping strategy, he in usual fashion, begins a new book for the autumn days ahead. He would then be a somewhat prolific writer, or musician. Would my reader not agree that he would somewhat begin to qualify for the title prolific? Well, this story, this comparison, and parable, might just have some lessons in it yet. I think that one of the reasons that we have the unofficial end of summer is so that we can look and inwardly see, around this time, exactly how the new winter is coming in each year. Whether robust, whether frightening, or whether profoundly frightening. It seems to me that there is an underrepresented segment of our societal system, so to speak, which is made of the somewhat unlikely volunteers. The wild nature. These small, furry and feathered, and horned, and antenna-bearing, and scaly, and slimy ones, I imagine, really inform our dreaming lives, in general. Although many of us spend most of our time largely ignoring them, I can't sense these powerful, wise nature spirits most profoundly, around the time of the arrival of Old Man Winter, each season, which usually happens around the unofficial end of summer. These are nature spirits, and presences, such as the local groundhog, and raccoons, and possums, and field mice, and rabbits, and armadillo. I reckon that this category extends into the arthropods, as well. The insects, and the rabbits which we might have locally. You see, that some of these creatures may in fact not make it through the winter. Some will die off with the killing frosts. This, I think, to make the story short, explains why I sense these early winter breezes and tidings so profoundly around this time of year. I know that I'm not the first to have written about this type of phenomenon, about these perceptions, in case you thought that my ego was a bad. I'm part of a community, I think, of writers, and painters, and musicians stretching back hundreds, if not thousands of years, who peel back the veneer, and who look at the collective beauty of lands, in general, only with an eye that also factors in the wild nature. Some of us will say that we have to keep these guys out, and I agree. Out of our homes and bedrooms. They wouldn't want us in their dens and corridors, either. But we can somewhat meet in the middle, in this sort of naturalistic stream of consciousness writing style, and at least make some record of the ideas of our multicultural, even multi-species consciousnesses. At any rate, I had better get some sleep. But tomorrow I'll look at these words with refreshed mind and spirit. Well, it's the next day, and our home here is doing well, and I have a few minutes before morning medicines, so I'll get down a few more ideas, if they materialize. I think that in most of my new writings, in the past, I began writing from the perspective of, well, the waves are really coming up on the side of the boat. So, by my starting some writing, I can kind of sublimate this worry, and transform it, and turn the lemons into lemonade. Numerous of my books have started this way. At any rate, this appears to be my usual style, for beginning a new set of writings. I've just never actually stopped, and counted all of the troubles, and ordeals, and hassles in my life from week to week. And I think it helps, somewhat, to see myself with a gentle understanding eye, for a change, and to somewhat admit, that this writing and music path isn't easy. My ordinary living, from week to week, isn't a leisure cruise. It's a job. Really an ordeal, to just go through the usual highs and lows of any standard week. So, having noted this, my heart goes again out unto my guardians, and oversight people, my management, and administrative staff, who really don't have an easy time, either, professionally, of facilitating my existence, in this home. Well, in any home. The team effort is always a large part of any given day. Such is greatly appreciated. I'd take off into the wide blue yonder, if I thought that I could survive on my own, but I've grown so solitary, and vegetative, in recent years, that I wouldn't even pretend to think that I could make it work, alone, for even a year. So, I think it's true, that those who don't marry, or get a permanent housemate will often need assistance. Such is greatly appreciated. Well, my day has progressed, and I've gotten this essay to a fair degree of completion. I'll just somewhat visualize these words coming into a logical resting position, until I can get my second article written, and add it in after. I'll wrap these ideas up, now, and add them in as my new starting essay. All for now, Greg. Till then I'll just peer into the leading edge of ideas, which arise upon resting my hands on my word processor keyboard. I had awoke and early, to somewhat get some writing done, to just look inside the new morning's light, and to ask it would remedy the pain of the opening article, somewhat by going behind myself, the next day, and making any nuanced changes to the structural integrity, necessary to help me feel better about the writing. If there's a thing that I'm most glad about, on a morning like this one, it's this: our system works great. I've never, in my time, in any of the neighborhoods where I've lived, had any instance of nighttime, or early morning slumber, or reading being disturbed, at all. I know that keeping the civic order, in our country, is a system based on our strong deterrence. This system works, flawlessly, if you want my accounting. Just like right now, I woke and early, and can't now easily summon the intelligence quotient necessary to effectively come up with a new second article. So, this is what I am working on, presently, with a little brew of mesquite, oxidized leaves of the Gamelia sinensis plant, also known as black tea. This caffeine delight can help the writing session, with words, then just tumbling off of your pen stylus, onto the page. So, this is the plan. The first article in this series, posted yesterday, was pretty special. The ideas had crowded my mind, and just overflowed onto the word processor page. When you can distill your latest thinking down into 4 or 5 main ideas, and concepts, that you can treat linguistically, in writing, then actually getting them onto paper is then like a catharsis, and my mind then lies at peace for a space. And I can rest knowing that the ideas have found an audience. So, this is why I went and put my thoughts onto the page yesterday morning. I figured I'd help myself enormously by getting them read by others. I would say, in reply to those people who wonder, how is your wintry, cold air effects and sight phenomena doing to you as we approach this season, this official end of summer? Well, let me start the reply by saying how well my writer's and musician's mind is doing this year, in general. All of my literary and musical goals and artistic goals have been met, and my results are just so satisfactory. I couldn't have wished for any better equity than this, the impromptu profundity audiobook, which I think has elevated my value as mental health consumer considerably. My guardian spirits are doing great, but the time has had its issues, and seeing these problems has stung my mind to its core. Since what happened last Friday, I've tolerated several depressed mornings. Such seemed to just require some sort of acknowledging by me of what appeared to have happened. Prayerfully, this was a hard realization which I replayed numerous times in my imagination's mind. At any rate, I really felt winter's fury as well in the serious weather events of the recent year. I think that the serious flooding out west, to apocalyptic floods, as well as the ones in the Carolinas, were just mind-numbingly proof of nature's raw power. When the road and parking lot in front of your store or place of business becomes a torrential river of brown water, and such overpowers your front door, and destroys everything inside, then you know that you've been hit by a stone-cold criminal. If only you could have foreseen and planned for that worst-case scenario. But, look on the bright side. In a nation of 340 million people, our statistics are very small indeed, that any one person dies by weather or violent crime. I looked it up, the chances of violent death in America, and it was in the range of a 1 in 100,000% chance. We're most likely to die of a cardiac event if we're of an age, and second in the list is stroke, this followed by cancer, and fourth, lower respiratory infection, especially in older people. So, most everyone fears worse than they actually face. Most people live long happy-lived, limited only by their bad habits, dietary habits, and smoking, and drinking, and risk-taking. So, it looks like my second article in this set is taking the form of some reassurances. Well, at any rate, I thought the reader would appreciate this quick reanalysis. And I hope that life continues to be good for you. Oh, what a lucky and happy man he was. At any rate, I'll see about finding a place to leave off with this writing, and give such a few reread to check for errors, and get ready for my morning later, now, and I'm going to see if I can finish this article out unto its completion, and make such into an audio text reading, and have this to give back, then. I'm looking, this morning, towards the day's meetings and appointments, and getting over to the office for my morning medicine is the first. After this, now, and I have a few minutes before I get to go over to the clinic across town, and get that accomplished. Today is the first Tuesday in September, this month, and I've gotten this writing going to accompany myself through the day's tedium. I'll get any appointments accomplished, and be back to my apartment in no time at all. At any rate, my own mind is weak and faint. I'm slow to see simple things, and sometimes I have to trudge through difficult processes, like I'm trying to pass an act of Congress, in arriving upon the right wording for a particular thing. I'm often having to be uncool and nerdy, because my prevailing mental construment has already been outdated. I labor over simple appointments and meetings. You'd think that I hold the reins of the nation. Such is the moldiness of my writer's mind. At any rate, I'm getting these thoughts down, to kind of determine just what is the matter, in the first place, which is, I think, the way the wording for this writing had to be arrived upon, and written out, in real time. My morning's appointment, I think, if it comes to pass, is for just a very minor vaccine update. I may be dealing with a sense that the time is wrong for this appointment. This may be the case, but the nurses aren't trying to bother me, but to try up the vaccine loose end. At any rate, I'll remember this morning's flu. I can't tell, because I've written such into my latest article, this one which you are reading now, and I've nearly finished getting these ideas down, and completed. Then, hopefully, when I've gotten 2 or 3 good essays into the beginning of a new book, part 1 of the Dream to Product audiobook, I'll make my new text reading and audiobook chapter preliminary. The only really annoying part of a morning like this one is the cloudiness and chances for rain this week. So if I have to get on the road any this week, right in the van, it may involve going through the rain, and somewhat waiting in the rain to be picked back up. Hopefully, there won't be disappointment this week. I've just wondered if, 4 to 6 months after my last vaccine update, I'm supposed to get the follow-up part to vaccine injection. Only this should be any time in the next 2 months. It's like I said, TBM rules my mind sometimes, as I'm working at any given time, now, on a new batch of writings. Getting the ideas in my head down on paper. Having some work going in work week in my lamp is a lot more preferable than not having such. At any rate, work life or not, I'll be glad when our sunshine weather is back, with cooler temperatures, as we are forecast later in this month. Well, I guess that I'll wrap these ideas up, and think about adding them in with the others. Now, this will then give me a green light to produce my audiobook start. All for now, Greg. Tilda from Dream to Product. It sure is good, in such a cynical age, when a sister will show a rather real honesty. Living doesn't have many happy areas, if we feel that our thoughts have caused us something that came after. This is the most common illusion of having a mind, I think. Yes, I think that if we wish to feel and experience grief, there will always be plenty of good causes, which we can find, of that grief. Maybe the satisfaction comes when we're happy and contented with the kind of goodness that we do find, especially if we don't have much to complain about. This morning, I'm glad to return in memory to someone who I care about, a portrait which reminds me of, and maybe we'll flow together and find some real happiness. I myself hear a lot of criticism from people that they don't actually show me. I'm paranoid, and I wrongly believe the criticism that I imagine from the minds of others. Oh, I know I'm too self-critical. Maybe, if you knew how much someone like me loves the thought of you, you'd ease up on yourself. What I think we want to do is to buy into the idea that we're attractive to whoever is nearby. I myself am usually just too hung up on the bad feelings, the pain, and discomfort around my face and head to allow many positive connotations with myself. Socially, you have to feel good. You have to be in touch with the bliss and ecstatic present naturally, otherwise you'll believe negative things about yourself. But, for many people, life is dues paying. Life is toil. Life is work. Maybe, when we're living solely for the sweet hereafter, this precludes us from appreciating all here and now. How do you think that your life would advance, socially, if you had a real experience of bliss in your life? But, you live to work. To purchase the heavenly abode, to earn the celestial palace, which you're somewhat given. We want to experience the ins and outs of our literature generation, of its creation, or we'll be bewildered and mystified when we are allowed to enter into such palace. Whose beautiful house is this? Whose lovely garden? So, I suggest that we get to know and familiarize ourselves with the work of living, or else we'll fly off into the courts of bad behavior. We'll be stuck with feeling regret for things that others have done through our lives. So, remember the work of self-authorship. Such is crucial to the experience of inhabiting that future place, which your spirit will inherit. So, the work of living, and of self-authorship, I think, is a precious part of owning that self-worth, when one day we come into full appreciation of such. Well, this morning, I'm dealing with some discomfort of digestive distress. My stomach has been cramping since I woke up, and the pile is coming back up into my mouth. My stomach is torn up. I'm wondering if it's just me, a stomach bug, or a real future issue with the contemporary time. Maybe it's the radio program that I'm listening to this morning. Putting problems such as these away from myself comes through, and my morning gets along. Well, we're having mostly sunny weather this week, with our only rain expected later this weekend. This is the first Wednesday in September, and I'm feeling fine. Quite delighted to just have the thought of you by my side, and to not be experiencing worry or grief about things that are only under the Lord's control. And do not be worried about any logistic train wreck. Your piano playing, for instance, doesn't ask such hard questions of others, or the happenstance of life. Things such as accidents in this world happen for real reasons, real checklists forgotten, or updates ignored. Such factors happen more in real time, within the scene, and not the seer. Does that make any sense? I guess it always depends on your perspective. Whether up or down, whether good or bad, whether happy or sad. Happiness is an illusion, which only affects your responses to ordinary events. Real happiness comes about of its own accord, only when things are in order. One might be at peace within the past, but not about the future, until the issue passes. Living is a pretty fun prospect, once the work and toil are behind. And I don't think that just saying so is the same thing as doing it. The time of pushing and striving might be the work spoken of. Corporate bosses know what it means to remodel an entire store. Remodeling the store isn't the push-button result. The regional manager has to know how to stay on contractors and managers. Employees who might have to learn new skills to tackle the challenges of such a job. Remodeling, for instance, is a pretty intensive sort of push, if you're going to maximize your work days and make the most of your employees. Your operating window. These are just my guesses, from having worked at stores that get remodeled. Those times are about like military campaign to get through. Supplies, equipment, skilled labor. These things have to be used, and not allowed to sit idle, in order to meet the schedule for completion. Living is a pretty fun thing, at best, and it should be, but this can take place only after the work and toil is behind. See, I work some, almost every day, but the unique media which I put forth 25 years ago was idiosyncratic to say the least, and the times, they were challenging as well. What I'm trying to say is that doing this work nowadays is easier than that earlier work was for myself. I got my first professional internet connection in 2000. So, learning my way around my corner of the World Wide Web could only be done gradually, and I wasn't shown a very representational view of the world until after Modern Back Tune, when my work got better and easier, and the time relaxed more. So those first 12, more like 15 years were a nightmarish introduction to publishing. But it was just how my life was given to me. I had had too much pain in my life, for a decade, up until 1998, to do professional quality work. But that was about when the real crazy stuff was just beginning. But even that period hardly compared to the wholesale killing of World War I and II, which were real meat grinders. So, you see, America hadn't had it easy. In the 20th century, there was a lot of loss. And then there was the Korean conflict and Vietnam War. My country got tasked with a lot of tough jobs. During wartime, whole industries were developed. Internal combustion power travel, aviation, and automobiles. The incandescent light bulb kicked off a whole revolution in not only home appliances and industrial processes, but telecommunications as well. Such things as the telegraph, the AM radio, and television came out of the wartime technology. At any rate, such was a stormy, turbulent time. And just today, the past 30 years have seen plenty groundbreaking technologies. With personal and palm-sized supercomputers, and the instantaneous publishing such brought to everyone, it's a wonder times weren't any worse than they were. But 9/11, I think, was a lot worse than Pearl Harbor. I thought I was living pain-free from 1998, but I struggled with mental issues. Simple bad migraines became the norm. I don't exactly mean tender kind of throbbing pain. I mean spatio-spiritual entanglements and complexities, felt and experienced as persistent issues around one's face and head. In the spaces around myself, the encompassing field of presences was a constantly puzzling predicament, an enigma, for me to solve daily. So, see, not exactly pain-free living, but more like vexation. At any rate, I've given you a whirlwind recap of the last 125 years or so. And there were always wars. The American Civil War. It's unbelievable that our young men had to square off in opposite armies and shoot one another with repeating rifles and cannons. Before that was the Revolutionary War, when the British used muskets and cannons against American soldiers. So, you can't say that we haven't had hard times. You can't. At any rate, I'll see and think about wrapping these ideas up. and adding them in with the others. Now, all for now, Greg. Till then, I'm going to see if there are any ideas beneath my surface. This first Thursday evening in September, this year. I've waited all day to try some writing, thinking that maybe by that time I will have solved today's puzzle sufficiently. I guess that I have a few ideas of a jazzy, improvisational sort. At the most, I think that I'll make some real progress on a fourth article in this new From Dream to Product audiobook. My background music comes in at around 1 hour in length, so I guess that I can come up with enough writing to completely make use of the beautiful sounds. That's really the objective for this writing. I've got a ways to go, as I'm almost 1/3 of the way there. At any rate, I've recently seen that I'm hardly even present these days in my friend group. I look at what some of the others are doing, but I think to myself that I've already expressed my piece. I've already had my say in my music, and audiobooks, and videos, and document files. I've seen so many miles going beneath my wheels recently that I'm nearly used to the sight of my own ghost. Some years hence. Well, it's easy to say that way, I guess, but I'm not going to count on it. I get the most excitement these days out of putting my hands and arms upstretched past the sides of my head. Even finding a visual way of threading the needle has been beneficial. Maybe that's been more beneficial than anything else. But it can't work for you if you won't try for yourself to use that method. At any rate, I'm glad to have gotten even these words into this article. And come to think of it, my hands feel large and competent upon this external Bluetooth keyboard. This, you know, suggests at a strong set of latencies in the heart of my guiding light. My guardian spirits. Here's the idea. If one doesn't mind delayed gratification, one will eventually get his or her needs met, regardless. It's only through the delay where we learn we can do without. Otherwise, the angels in heaven will remain forever out of reach. I remember when I moved into this residence, I went for more than a month. More like 6 weeks. Doing without the drinks and snacks I love. But that was some reassurance that I can be like the angels if I have to. You'd be jealous of me if you knew the good that can come of delayed gratification. This is something that the disabled will be familiar with. I like mighty brews kind of strong. So when I get to do without them, even for only 3 days, I'll feel so much more in tune with my environment. This will be when I really do live in full color. When I can get past that need for brew. This comes when your needs are being met in other ways. For attention, for gentleness, for a soft look, by readers who take some time with you. It's not so hard to go without then. At least this is my theory on the matter. Every once in a while, the writer or artist enters into an apparent period when his or her strategies get put to the test, and it feels as if nature has risen up against him. But just as such an experience arises, so it also subsides. I've been through this a few times through the years. I'll do a record or art piece that causes the light bulbs in my head to strobe for 24 or 48 hours, and I'll be glad when the experience subsides. It's not hard, as long as I don't try and be like a diva, most immaculate. I'm just a somewhat overweight mortal man, but I can always take the lemons I'm given and make lemonade. So, this is what this writing is like. This starting of a new set of writings. The godly start usually encounters resistance. At the beginning of a book project, the writer is an ugly lump of coal. But, if he uses perseverance, he'll find hidden inner structures, and will come to see the light refract. Crystalline latticework, then. But, it takes a little patience, like wine, to age to maturity. At any rate, I'll put this writing away, until new ideas can formulate. Anyway, all for now. Greg. The next day, and I'm practically glad to have to deal with the ordinary waiting which the disabled are commonly shown, relying on the assistance of others, as they do. But, the shade from this tree feels good, and I'm contented, knowing that we'll get through it. The main thing, to me, is knowing how the driver is fully competent, and how our trust in her or him is well placed. If there's one thing that those who rely on others know, it's we'll get there. The idea in my head are better remembered, I found, if I'll write them down. And then my life will be more than just a great wash of memories. more than just a twinkling memory. I've been augmented and ionic since I first began using the phone word processor's autocomplete feature in 2020. This simply amounts to a raise in my intelligence quotient. I don't make grammar, spelling, or syntax mistakes anymore, which is pretty good, isn't it? At any rate, our day has gotten along, and we're back, now, from a grocery trip. So, my needs and wants have been seen under. Today is Friday, the first one in September, this year. I'm glad to have gotten this writing started, and along, and am greatly looking forward to getting it produced in with the other recent articles. I'm glad to be as free as I am, having just started this new book project, at the first of this month. I think that it's pretty good to already have this new audiobook chapter coming along as well as it is, with no issues to speak of. That, for my part, is just great. I'm feeling pleasantly contented, spending this Friday dusky time listening to optical CDs on a good personal player, and lazily adding onto this new article whatever thoughts arise. This kind of communion is just rare and special. Our sun is setting to the west in front of our building, across our driveway, and behind the pines, casting its golden rays through the trees onto our buildings. I think that I can find some peace in these simple things. It will be good to get this article finished, and added in with the others. Well, I'm settling into bed, and trying to finish this article. I could sit looking at a shuffle of my art museum's collection on my computer long into the night. I get my fill, and have to turn it off just to get to sleep. I think to myself that there couldn't be any greater fulfillment than this. But my intuition tells me that to be a ghost, and to merely float upon the air, and to see and know all, passively, is really the unmatched experience. Especially being such way in the midst of writers, and artists, and dreamers. As I sit up, in this bed, I'm continuing to look deep into the minds of these 20th century artists. I'm seeming to see every expressive nuance, and niche as the artist's intention and imagination had rendered such. This is like drinking in a visual feast spanning all sorts of times and places, knowing and understanding the currency of dreams themselves. At any rate, I think that these ideas are coming to their logical endings in truth here, so I'll wrap them up and end with the others. Now, all for now, Greg. Till then, I thought I'd somewhat look into what might could be said about my style of playing keyboard music. What, if anything, can be said soberly, in ordinary criticism? Well, here's what I think. I'm a builder, in a basic sense. There are a world of proficient keyboard players out there, in jazz, blues, rock, and soul, and gospel, and country, and the unique thing about my playing, I think, is that I'm not technically proficient at all. Maybe I can't press keys to get certain sonic effects. My instrument may have a wide range of sampled acoustic instrumental sounds, and synthesized specialty sounds, which are not like any acoustic instrument, but which are built up electronically, using AWM, wave memory synthesis. For instance, I was just wondering, just what am I, as a keyboardist, if not in the criticism of myself? So, in an effort to get down some ideas about the character of my artist persona, I'm going to describe the way that I play. As I said, I am almost completely lacking in proficiency at the keyboard, whether piano or otherwise. But I can press notes and sonically sculpt a mood or a type of emotional feeling. I think that if my playing itself had one attribute, which I could say, it would be in my phrasing, which is usually legato, slow, elongated, and drawn out. I can't summon feeling to embellish or adorn my usually soft and expressive phrases. If you can't think of the way a female voice talks, in a soothing and calming manner, in an articulate way and with certain emphasis on the specifics of what she's saying, this is somewhat how my playing, that best tends to be. The sampled and synthesized voices which my keyboard produces, some of them are real sonic treats to hear played back. So, what I've tried to do is to play and record some aesthetic pieces, as if I were featuring some of those great voices in a most evocative way, as if I were trying to demonstrate the best of them, and give the listener the kind of fantasy view of my particular keyboard brand and model. How does this particular keyboard sound at best? How have I featured different voices in the best way to show their beauty, their texture, warmth, clarity, presence, sonorous qualities, beauty, to show and demonstrate the instrument in a positive light. At any rate, I would say that I've maximized my instrument by playing numerous examples of how it sounds at best. At any rate, my playing itself has strong expressive abilities, especially as in the soothing, reassuring, calming and gentle female voice, which is proficient, as well at emphasis and aiding fashion of a wide range of expressive flourishes and embellishments, somewhat like a friend who will somewhat offer ideas and feedback and suggest directions. So my spirit guides have allowed me to take my sounds into the locale where I desire to take them. This has made my playing so much my own expression. Well, I guess I can talk about my instrument and the ways that the sounds are so sweet, some of them, but I'm missing something important if I don't talk some about the great expressive ability of the spirit inspiration of a fully conscious mind in flowing like a stream through the person playing. To paraphrase another, this is the soul inside of the machine. This is the inner duality, which talks quietly with itself and engages in conversations about art and idealism and finds some definite wins, even through a medium such as music, if it comes down to it. So, this has to be the best of what an ability can do. This consciousness of a secondary, or tertiary animating principle, which only a higher ascended presence can bring. As for myself, my mom did her best to enroll me in piano lessons from about age 7 to 17, so I guess I have some proficiency in the theory, but I've forgotten most of this ability to read or write music tablature. I just go as the spirit leads me, and I might never leave the key of C, because of the fact that I find that the easiest for me, with the fewest black keys having to be used, to get the basic full sound. So, in this article, I've somewhat started by talking about the ways that framing ability, and the sweetness of digital sampling, and synthesis can allow for full-fledged self-expression, and I have concluded this by somewhat giving most of the credit for my energy, if there were any, to my own guardian spirits, who, I guess, can't tell the story more accurately. But I think that in heaven, one day, we'll grow to be fairly disinterested in ghost driving, because we'll be so keen into the collective psyche of all mankind. This is something you will grow more attuned to. You see, as souls, we don't have any real boundaries. While souls reach out, interrelatively, if we could perceive that far. At any rate, our ego striving, I believe, tends to get sublimated into the collective concerns of the human species as a whole. Isn't this interesting? At any rate, I thought I'd just cover some of these ideas, to show for myself. Because, partly, what am I, if not a criticism about me? I know, I guess, that I'm free, or encumbered. Time of, or down. I'm left or I'm right. But, if no one is there to see me, am I really there? This is a good question. At any rate, I'll set this writing aside for a while, and see if some more ideas develop, or if this will be a complete article. But, I wanted to offer my self-criticism, because self-criticism might be all I ever get, if any at all. To paraphrase another, the old town creek goes on and on about me, and without me, it can be about its own self, can't it? Can't I be about my own self, as well? Characteristics, such as good qualities, are elusive things. They are often acquired, only to be lost. To hold on to who you are, you'll just want to write your thoughts down. I might as well be a figment of the mind, until I write my ideas down. Well, I'll wrap these words up, and bring to a conclusion. Now, all for now, Greg. Tilda. I think that I awoke around 5 this morning. Today is the second Monday in September, this year. We've got good sunshine as this day begins, and our forecaster tells us that we can expect sun through the week. Our temperatures will be in the middle 80s to low 90s by Friday. So, this is a beautiful week, but hot, if you were expecting cool fall temperatures. So, this is really nothing like what I was thinking at the first of the month. This is the summer. Strong spirit presences run like streams through people's lives and art. It's so good to have good spiritual guidance. Many people dispense with ego striving when they are somewhat young, and so these might not get the strong literary voice much at all. Some of us will be writers, and so we'll make use of, and enjoy, the connection as we can find it, with spiritual muses, as they occur in our society. The writing of thoughts is a real gift, much like pennies from heaven. Many people are mediumistic, like this, and cherish the connection, any good connection, with a higher ascended being. Living, I think, is a process of growing in faith, knowledge, and trusting your own particular guardian spirits, and learning to walk ever closer with such. The dazzling morning sun makes most of us glad, and some of us have it in our soul as well, and we'll tell you, or let you know. Most aren't shy about the sunshine in their soul. I'm proud of my inner light, and I'll tell anyone. We had a pretty peaceful weekend. On our news pages, at least, so we're happy about that, I'd say. My goals for this week are to continue more of the same. I also think that I should be able to finish this first part of my From Dream to Product audiobook. Staying on my housework is a part of meeting these goals. I'm in a period when I'm thinking about my yoga stretch visualization. And I'm also thinking somewhat about another particular way of seeing the door through which my mind perceives, which might be something like the eyes set into my head, as well as the somewhat vertical openings behind my nose and sinus through which my nose breathes. I think this is new and interesting. The double slit experiment, I think, is a way of comparing the wave patterns coming from through two openings side by side, and comparing the way the spectrographic analysis looks, one opening or the other, to determine some information about the light source object. I've never seen such show up as a pain relief meditation, or visualization. At any rate, you might could ask yourself, do I see the difference between the usage of this double slit meditation and the yoga stretch visualization? Which is best for pain relief? Also, the listener might notice how this musical artist really has a profound sound. For this sounds like music from the island. He dabbles in what I would call high strangeness. Or else just makes you feel pleasant. I guess I've been through experiences like these, both of these types of moods, back in the years when I wouldn't let myself get isolated. Powerfully effective music albums, like these, are good for, let's remember, having had extraordinary experiences in hermeticism, can build in a person a musical or artistic range that might be called powerfully effective. You see, we tend to make expressions based in our own experiences. This is also a stage of the Jungian individuation, in which the person illustrates, artistically, the contents of his or her visionary experience. At any rate, with a strong spiritual guide in your heart consciousness, you'll at times wade through dark waters, as well as the tropics, but you will always tend to return to your home place. I know, because I've been walking in the light of the yacht, to paraphrase the song, for more than 20 years. At any rate, I've read back through this article, and tried to make it come up to the highest sensible standards, which I know of. Still another reread shows that I've made progress, so I can move along into the rest of the article. I've had a good, productive day today, because I've gotten this article along toward its completion. But that's not the only thing I've done. I also have been in the pursuit of figuring out what to do with the kind of we think, and somewhat working with that cooperatively. This was, I think, just an unusual projection of my own created life. And it was good to solve such to my satisfaction. The person had expanded on an idea I might have seen, but in a different way. And I somewhat got spooked by my own echoances. At any rate, you see, the matter seems to have cleared up on its own. At least I'm breathing easier. Now, later in the day, I had to hustle to get abreast of something I couldn't understand, such as an endless abundance of classic literature, or good material of any kind, apparently from nothing. As found in the Dudab, the intrinsic pairing of gender attraction, at the heart of some movements. Ufology, for example, which proposes that some people have been in a process of telepathically reverse engineering of alien UFO craft and technology for half a century or more. Some say that this process is chiefly heralded by the plethora of crystal skulls, which dispense knowledge telepathically, supposedly based around the mythical trove of silver, gold, or platinum binary encoded discs, which researcher Von Anakin claims to have been taken to and seen in a Central American cave, and subsequently denied access to, ever since. But the crystal skulls, however, are known of, and can be largely found, except for a few. I believe that any inventor, however, can't tap into the field of such presences. This is somewhat what this present writer is, also. And I think this kind of downlinking works best when a person makes, or is given an alliance with a higher ascended being, and this then happens across the veil. This might also be at the heart of some movements, as I see these types of things in others. As I come upon them, the tendency is to feel threatened by such, or compromised in some way. But these might be the only way I know to access information of a rarer, or higher nature. What do you think? At any rate, I can't see these ideas somewhat coming to their conclusion about now, so I'll wrap them up, and end with the others. All for now, Greg. Tilda. I'll go to my word processor screen, in thought, to somewhat see just what is beneath my surface, tonight. I'm very glad for this new audiobook chapter, but it was not easy to get the bugs worked out. I would say it was challenging work. Before I go farther in my career doing this type of work, my readers should know, I don't consider myself any special artist. I'm a content developer, period. You shouldn't look for cosmic meaning in my work. Maybe that's been the main thing for me to get past. For my readers to muddle through, this type of writing is no more than just whatever I can't come up with. I love this issue get me confused through the years, and for that, I'm sorry. Part of myself was just trying to follow in my dad's patterns, but I definitely understand now. I'm just mainly staying busy, so that I'll have something to show for the time spent, and so as to make some record of my thoughts and visions. My mind is following, I think, so many various things in our culture. Part of what I write, and do visual design, and music, is so that I'll glean some inkling about what is in my subconscious mind. I've often thought of how, as people we walk along the shores of life, our mediumistic working, on lasting media, of our ideas and visions, fills our conscious minds in as to the ocean depths of the psyche, and can even help illumine, by filling us in, as to the heavenly ongoings. The unseen hosts, and the throngs about ourselves, invisibly. Our written, or painted output can reveal many aspects of our own expectations, for starters, and so this is maybe the main window into our subconscious and unconscious minds. We may not know quite how we feel about things, right now, until we can make a connection with another soul, and get to hear our own voice. How do I feel tonight? I'll find out, if I'll share a word or two with someone near me. And this is the style of mediumistic art that I'm given. And what I'm saying, is that when we write, or sketch, or play music in consciousness of the invisible latticework of presences about ourselves, well, we get to look within the contents of our own thoughts and feelings, and come into more full consciousness of just what is said about things right now, because our surrounding hosts will speak through our own output. So, in so many ways, I've allowed myself to get forgetful of this subconscious ocean, and vast unconscious invisible heavens. In a way, in the next word from my guardian spirit, I found it easy to forget what is always present, and is part of our writing, and visions, and music. The spirit guide is a hand to hold. She might not rise much. She can, I believe, but so much more of what comes through our typist or musician's hands is simply the default output, given our subconscious and unconscious feelings, and inklings, and concepts, and perceptions, and expectations, and hopes, and fears. Such unconscious latency is like a powerful animal pet, or even a small child. Such can, of course, exert powerful effect over, or through ourselves, if we've fallen into their concerns. Does this make any sense? We living people are mortals, and we, in some circumstances, were susceptible to interference, and truth-telling, by any superpositional aspect. If a powerful, superpositional spirit wants to humble me, he or she just will. I'll have to tolerate whatever distortion then happens, unless I can explain how it was the alcohol, or I must have been hypnotized, or I got a cancer because of my smoking tobacco for 20 years or more. Whose fault is this? It's powerfully addictive. Well, I've gotten through this start of a new article. I've looked so far at how I'm seeing myself as a content developer, not an artist. and at some of the powers of our subconscious and unconscious minds, and at how our subconscious mannerisms are shaped by our beliefs, our perceptions, and expectations, and desires, and at how we can look upon these mannerisms and tendencies if we'll look critically at our mediumistic writings going onto a page, or sounds going onto a recorder, or painted or sketched markings going onto a canvas or page. I somewhat read back at these writings, and in places, I seem to be acting as a kind of a town crier for people who find ways to creatively and harmlessly occupy their hands, minds, and eyes. I think that there's a revolution in a disabled person's world anytime that a schizophrenic patient learns to sketch, or paint, or play some music, or write. For instance, maybe my pianistic claim to fame is in my hypnotic usage of repetition, more than any technical proficiency. So, you might could see how I somewhat changed my place in the world, to paraphrase the song, by teaching myself this way of playing, or by allowing it to come through my playing into recording devices. Now anyone can benefit from this soft, sublime style of playing, this hypnotic way. Visually, now, I think that I've developed the style of using macro, close-up, or abstracted views of nature, which fit together into a composite, and which appear to have unseen, but felt interrelationships. You might should write some reviews for yourself, too. You might like the attention. Have you ever thought of doing a self-portrait? Here's a question. How do you hermetically seal your mouth? Can you somewhat remove the bad air from your personal space? Hermetically seal it. At any rate, I'm glad to have gotten this article written. I'm glad to have solved some persistent problems, which I've just never been able to conclusively deal with. This helps my content flow enormously. My self-esteem should be somewhat better. Well, today is the second Tuesday in September, this year, and I'm sitting writing to finish this article. My spirit guide maintains almost constant eye contact with me. This is the most reassuring thing I've ever experienced. I want to write this observation down, so that I don't forget it, and so that I'll carry some memory of this time into my future. If I don't, such details will get lost to time. At any rate, I can't see these ideas coming to their logical conclusions in through here, so I'll wrap them up and add in with the others. All for now, Greg. Till then, it's a Wednesday morning, the 2nd of this September, this year. Our skies are cleared, without any clouds. We're going to experience warmer weather, again, with temps nearly back in the 90s, this afternoon. I've somewhat gotten this new writing project in the black, and I have mostly put it out of my consciousness, and have investing in the strength of my voice. Yesterday was quite restful, and I appreciated getting some design work accomplished. So my spirit is happy to be at rest, following a hard work week, when my details and fine adjustments seemed to be endless. To get a new chapter began. I came through some dense brambles last week, in worrying about too much that I didn't need to be bothering myself for. Being in the world, as a writer, musician, a content developer, fills you in as to the worries around ordinary living. Doubts and insecurities are a part of this. When I can't transcend these troubles, and get contented reading chores done, like rereading my recent work. This is always good. Usually, reading will give me at least one revision idea. I can't fix an issue if I don't know of its existence. So I always have to make time for this reading. As I sit here this morning, getting these ideas down, I'm reminded of the importance of my yoga stretch visualization. Someone told me recently, this is in the same category with breathwork. The term holotropic breathwork, i.e., moving towards wholeness, is a concept that has been around for a while. I just look at it from my own idiosyncratic perspective, because I see that, for me, visualization exercises can rejoin a being with his or her own timeless soul, gradually reacquainting himself with eternal wisdoms of the higher realms. Anytime we're using visualization exercises, we're learning the ways of soul consciousness. I think that broadened wisdom, for instance, suggests that ideas predate their objects. Everything real and lasting in the world has this broadened, or ultimate consciousness as its origin and ultimate destination. Any real philosophical inquiry will get into this question of who, and what, and where, and when and why were we before our physical existence in this lifetime. There's never been any real concerted agreement on this, between psychology, faith, and religion, but I tend to think that, by looking at the general consensus opinions, as our beings grow and mature, our understandings, over time, will shape themselves into something in spiritual worldview that I can rest in. You'll never know of this if you don't inquire of your own within and make up your own mind on these questions. And this is the same gist, or guide, or grist of the corn. The grist, or basis of one story, for instance, that I was shown 25 years ago, in year 2000, in writing my first real book, The Stream of Consciousness, book. At any rate, I sure am glad to have good strong leadership in getting myself good new work this morning. Such is not taken lightly. At any rate, I found, through the years, good ways to incorporate mundane details of my life's past. These always help by lending my work a certain bearance, as I pass the years. I'll remember the time, and some of the details of the ways we were, to paraphrase the song. This will be of use in covering my memories, so that they'll be more than only a great wash. The question of, should I make mention of this, or that trivial detail, might amount to my particular characteristic style in getting ideas written down. I'll remember my daily ups and downs much better by writing, and I'll remember my own unique style through the years, in what I include in my writing, and what I don't include. The powerful, deviatic beings about ourselves. The lattice work of presences about our lives, our potentialities. Nowhere is past, present, and future more accessible by a person than in consciousness of these elemental presences. This can mean that you control your own destiny, but you have got to be devout to something and live righteously, or you'll get hurt. I think that a good lesson is in how, when I was younger, I had a lot going for me. A great job, which I was good at. But my life lacked meaning and purpose. I would get off of work and go home and drink beer and smoke my tobacco until I passed out. That life just wasn't walking in spirit. So I became a lesson of what not to do. So, at age 22 or 3, I was allowed into the inner conversation. While I still had some painful years in living with a thorn in my side, the curse was reversed at age 28. My life was saved by the local university hospital, and I was given a second life, and have been dedicated to writing and music ever since. This is a start on a new writing, and I'm in my presence of mind this morning, so I guess it's coming along good. It's not much. At any rate, we've gotten our monthly appointment taken care of, so I'm happy with this. If there's a lesson, right now, it's in how no one's going to change your life, except for you, to paraphrase the song. There's no illusory phenomena that can affect your life, if you'll remember to use your common sense. You've got to know by instinct how to deal with people who will try to get you in a corner. Remember your common sense, and, by all means, to stay in touch with your surroundings. At any rate, I have a puzzle or two to work on, ordinarily. But if I won't try for myself, in usual ways, in normal circumstances, such as in remembering my checklist, then solving alone won't save it. You should have a good centering meditation, or you'll get too distracted by a vigorous migraine condition, when such happens sometimes. At any rate, these are just some thoughts. We've gotten back home, and have had a bite to eat, and I settled onto this couch, to work on finishing this essay. I was very blessed to have had this to work on, while I was getting my medicine. At any rate, there was a popular column, in a monthly magazine, when I was growing up, which was called, "Laughter is the Best Medicine." I think this is still true, for myself, 40 years later. If I can smile, or laugh at the devil's funny, sometimes desperate, sometimes clumsy, always obvious but sometimes puzzling antics, I'll get past the trouble easiest. I think you really have to look out for yourself, if you're in a car or van. There will be occasional puzzle to solve. If a puzzle catches me off guard, I sometimes panic on the inside, my inner self desperately trying to figure out what had caused the discrepancy. For instance, this is, unfortunately, sometimes, where a bad migraine comes at me unexpectedly. So, this is the gist of this writing. This 21st century world is too fast-paced to be dealing with excessive absorption, or fantasy-prone behavior. This is what my dad wisely realized about my life. back 30 years ago. So, this helped my inner development enormously. The types of problems some people have these days, you look at the news and say, that person should have gotten help 20 or more years ago. Maybe then the outcome would have been better. Anyway, this is an important piece of writing, because this is something that is important to remember. When a puzzling sign or symptom arises, for instance at your place of business, you have to remember your centering meditation. Otherwise a bad migraine will have its awful way with you. You might be left wondering what happened after you find yourself rudely treated because of dubious behavior or psychotic symptoms. Well, this has been some ideas. I can't get that these ideas are somewhat coming to their logical conclusion now, so I'll wrap them up and add them in with the others. It's always good when a definite, common sense lesson emerges from out of the ordinary flow of a normal day, especially if you can learn from what appeared to have happened, and get such lesson into writing. Of course, for instance, if an awful migraine pounds upon you, at your work, or on the road, when you're in a state of puzzlement, or vexation, you definitely should have a good centering meditation. I can't stress this enough. My migraines get quite bad, as, since the middle 1990s, I've been diagnosed with something called a killer migraines, which sometimes get disorienting, and debilitating to say the least. You would want to get off of the road, as soon as possible if this came up. At any rate, these have been some ideas. I'll add them in, with the others, and send them along your way now. All for now, Greg. I'll sit, this morning, at this word processor screen, with my Bluetooth keyboard, and peer within my collective now. In conclusion to this part 1 of my new book, I'm usually quite amazed to see the words and thoughts that arise, most any time I sit to write. I think that it's as we're most conscious of the spiritual latticework of presences around ourselves, that we are able to readily tap into the encompassing field of good ideas. The person is something like a lighthouse at the entryways to a harbor. Others know that when your good, loving light is shining, there'll be a safe passage into shore. If you have a problem with the waves coming up on the side of your boat, then you'll appreciate the shelter of the harbor. For myself, ever since I've been in the midst of a good guiding spirit, such has equated unto the security and shelter of the harbor, I think that jazz is a way of creating good, low-to-use content, without changing the world in any bad way. If your ideas are guided by strong spiritual indwelling, you won't speak out of turn. You'll have an egalitarian voice that does no harm. I think that what I'm trying to do with this writing this morning is to give a quick recap to the latest book chapter so that I can close it away and get to the next chapter. I think that this book will have 2 or 3 chapters. So, this being the first, I figured I'd just come up with a few thoughts in closing. Today is the second Thursday in September this year. Our weather this week is beautiful. Nearly all week, we've got lovely clear blue skies and hot temperatures. Just resting my hands on this keyboard tends to allow the most up-to-the-date ideas to surface. This, I think, is the great blessing of having a good higher ascended spirit guide. I think that the ideas I can't get down now, this morning, will readily serve as a concluding flourish, and provide some closure to the recent pieces. It's a most blissful thing to know that our land's system works well, that our deterrents are effective enough to stave off lawbreakers. Our democracy is something like the highest flower of our strong Christian beliefs. I wouldn't trade such or any other way. At any rate, having the willpower to try, in music or art, is something that many others might would envy. I've found through the years that the all-around lesser of the evils is to engage myself in a literary or artistic chore, which I can be sure of accomplishing. The victory itself, which comes of having a new voice onto the page, is plenty reason to keep such up. Someone like me can meet the goals of writing, or playing music, or sketching effectively. But such requires that I suspend self-doubting, and just let the Lord lead. You'll get used to being in this zone, where good solid work arises almost effortlessly. At any rate, these ideas are getting along down this page this morning. I'll be glad to somewhat bring them to a conclusion, and make an ending to this chapter. But sometimes make me quite flustered, and I'm glad to get past them. Today somewhat is a time period when I've been at my busiest. I'm recently more prolific than I've ever been before. When I was a young man, I had numerous good jobs, and managed to earn my rent and grocery money. One of my best jobs was at a phototypesetting business, in the south of this town. I would do proofreading, with a partner. We would take turns reading aloud valleys to one another, and comparing them with the original copy, from the client. We had big jobs to do, every day. Big jobs and small jobs, there was good work every day. The point I'm making is that people everywhere work 9 to 5 jobs, every day. My creative productivity these days is good work, when I can find it. Before I started this book, the From Dream to Product, I had a 3-week vacation, where I took it easy, and had nothing in process. Then, this was about enough time for me to start missing the regular rhythms of having a project going. I would imagine, in my mind, that I felt a calling, and that I had ideas running around in my head. When I started this book, at the first of this month, I had 3 or 4 main ideas up in my head, which I wanted to put onto lasting media. So having the ideas, I was given a strong beginning, and got the book along. And now the first chapter is nearly finished. Well, I hope this clears up, for you, doubts around why do I do work such as this. More than anything, I love the close communion with my higher power which comes when I'm lovingly building new writing. This is when the world has fallen away, and it's just you and your beloved, building for the love of having something to show for the time. This, to me, is how to keep a relationship strong. Keep up the work done as a unison. Just you, with your spirit, and your tools and instruments, and materials. Well, I'll wrap these ideas up, now, and try to bring them to their conclusion. When I get them added in with the others, I'll be able to produce and mix down my finished part 1. Well, I'll get to it. All for now, Greg.